Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Hi students, welcome to the session. In this session, we are going to talk about respiration in other animals. Up till now, we talked about how the respiration occurs in human beings, and in human beings, we saw the working of lungs. When we talk about the working or mechanism of lungs or respiration that occurs in human beings, similar kind of respiration occurs in animals like elephant, dog, cat, and any animal which breathes through lung. Same kind of respiration and same processes occurs. Definitely the positioning of lung might be different, but the way it works is similar. In this session, we are going to talk about the organisms which have very different type of mechanism of breathing altogether, including the organs, right? In our bodies or in the body of a cat or a dog or an elephant, they have lungs. But in certain insects, the kind of breathing organs that they have is completely different. We are going to take an example of cockroach and we are going to see that what are the different ways in which the insects breathe. Before that, what we are going to discuss is the question that Bujo is asking, and he wants to know if cockroaches, snails, fish, earthworms, ant and mosquito also have lungs. So we know that all of these organisms do not have lungs, right? The lungs snails are the only organism which have lungs. Some of the varieties have lungs and others might have gills. We know that fish breathes through gills, right? The earthworm, we will see in this particular session that the earthworm breathes through its skin, right? And we are going to talk about the cockroaches, ants and mosquitoes as a group because these are your insects and they usually breathe through the tracheal system. What exactly is the tracheal system? We are going to study and we are going to understand that. Let's start by understanding the breathing mechanism in cockroaches. Now, these cockroaches have, to understand the breathing mechanism, we will just simply look at the sides of the cockroaches. Usually the cockroach has the small openings at the side of its body. So this is suppose the body of a cockroach, right? So it has openings on the side of the body. These openings are the ones which help in the movement of air in the body and outside the body, right? So this kind of opening is seen in the case of your cockroaches. Now, these openings are called as spiracles, right? These are called as the spiracles. Such kind of openings are seen in other insects also. So over here you can see this is the side part of the body and these are your spiracles, right? So these are the small openings through which the air rushes into the body of the cockroach and the air that is not needed anymore is removed. Like in our case, we were talking about inhalation and exhalation. Similar is the case with cockroaches also. The difference is that in human beings, we had nostrils through which the air was going in and coming out, and over here the animals, the insects have spiracles. These are the small openings that are present on the side of the body of the cockroaches and other insects, right? Now these insects have the network of air tubes called as the trachea, right? So these are the trachea that are present. These are the network of tubes that are used for the exchange of gases, right? So how does this happen exactly? Right, over here you can see these are the tracheal tubes. These are connected to one another and you can see that when the air goes into the body, right? So this is the main. So this tracheal tubes, spiracles are just the opening and these are the tracheal tubes which will help in the exchange of the body, When we say tracheal system, this tracheal system is composed of spiracle and the tracheal tubes. These tracheal tubes contain air, and in this, with the help of these tracheal tubes, the exchange of gases takes place. That means that in the whole body, the tracheal tubes are distributed. And suppose this is a tracheal tube, and over here there is oxygen and CO2. Right? So oxygen that is present and has to be utilized in the body comes out of the tracheal tube, and CO2 goes out through these spiracles. Right? So this is how the exchange of gas takes place with the help of the tracheal tubes. Right? So like I said, that the oxygen will diffuse out and will reach all the tissues of the body of a cockroach, and the CO2 that is not needed is taken from all the cells and it is removed from the body. And this exchange of gases occurs with the help of, first of all, in the body it happens because of the tracheal tubes, and with the air, that is the taking in of air and removing the carbon dioxide, occurs through spiracle. So this kind of tracheal system, this is the tracheal system. Why is it called as the tracheal system? Because the exchange of gases depends on the trachea or the tracheal tubes, right? And this kind of system is only found in insects and no other organism, right? So in any of the organism, this kind of exchange of gases doesn't take place and we do not notice it. But in the case of insects, we usually see this kind of diffusion occurring, and the system is called as the tracheal system. Now, next we are going to talk about earthworms. So earthworms, we've done the activity in class 9 and we saw that earthworm had a slimy skin. We also were talking about the body movements in class 6, and there also when we picked up the earthworm, we saw that the skin was moist and it was slimy. The reason for that is, one of the reason is that it assists in movement, definitely. Another reason is that these earthworms do not have lungs, right, like human beings. What they do is they breathe through their skin, which is moist and slippery. This moist and slippery skin, it helps in the exchange of gases. The gases can easily pass through the moist and slimy skin. Also, if we take an example, we see that apart from earthworm, even frog has the moist and slimy skin. Frog can breathe through two ways. First is the lungs. So we know that frog can survive both in land and water. So frog is able to breathe through lungs as well as it is able to breathe through its skin, which remains moist and slippery, right? Again, moist and slimy, or you can also say slippery, right? The reason why the skin has to remain moist and slippery is because the exchange of gases can take place easily through the moist skin, right? So that's why whenever we are touching the earthworm, we feel it to be moist. Also, if you suppose, you must have seen that when it is raining, only then the earthworms come out. The reason for that is that the water or present in the environment helps in the survival of the earthworm. If it is too sunny, it's really hot, what will happen? The moisture will be removed from its skin and the earthworm will die. Right, that's the reason why we see that during the rainy season, the earthworm you'll be able to see a lot of earthworms around. Right, so in this way we see how other organisms also breathe through different ways. In insects, there is tracheal system, and in earthworm and frog, these animals have moist skin, which helps in the exchange of gases. Up till now, we've talked about how the lungs work and how the breathing is in the insects and in earthworm. All of these are terrestrial animals. That means these are the land animals. Now we are going to talk about the animals that are present inside water, and these are fishes. And we know that fishes use gills for their respiration. Now, why do they have a special feature? Why do they have this special organ and not in lungs like all of us do? The reason is that the breathing, that the oxygen that they need to obtain is dissolved in water, right? So breathing underwater is a little different from that which occurs in the air, because the oxygen is dissolved in the water. Now, how does this happen with the help of gills? Let's understand. First of all, let's understand that gills are the projections of the skin, and they are very well supplied with the blood vessels. What happens exactly is, I'm pretty sure all of you must have seen the fishes swimming in aquariums, and if you've not, I would suggest that you observe them, and you will see that the fishes are actually opening and closing their mouths regularly. So what happens is, the water goes into their mouth and it is passed upon the water is passed upon the gills. When the water is passed upon the gills, the blood capillaries which are present in them, the oxygen is diffused into the blood capillaries. So this is the blood capillary, suppose, and over here the water is passing over it, right? Because we know that the blood capillary is richly supplied, the gills are richly supplied with the blood vessels. So the oxygen that is present in this water goes inside, and whatever CO2 is present in the in your blood vessels that are present in the gills goes back into the water. And in this way we see that the water that contains or is rich in CO2 comes out of the gill, right? So in this way we see how the gills help in the exchange of gases, right? Please understand that opening and closing of mouth is usually seen in the fishes. The reason is that the water goes into the mouth and it is passed over the gills, and the gills that are richly supplied with the blood vessels absorb or take in the oxygen that is present in the water and diffuse out the carbon dioxide, right? And in this way the oxygen is supplied into the body of your fishes. Now, this is all about the gills that are present in fishes. Certain organisms or certain animals that live under the sea do not use gills. What are these organisms? Let's understand. But before that, Bujo has a question. He has seen in television programs that whales and dolphins often come up to the surface. They even release a fountain of water sometimes while moving upwards. Why do they do so? Now, these whales and dolphins do not have gills. These respire through the lungs, right? And we know that lungs lungs use air for breathing. Lungs, like for example, if we talk about human beings, we will not be able to breathe inside the water, because we are not, the lungs are not the organs that can take in oxygen from water, right? The lungs take in oxygen from air only. And that is the reason why we see that these organisms, that is the dolphin and whale, come up to the surface of the water. The reason is that they have a blowhole, right, which acts as nose, right? This blowhole is utilized to take in the air and release out carbon dioxide. And this fountain that you are able to see is the excess water that might go inside the blowhole, right? So what happens is that these organisms come to the surface, take in the air that they require, and remove excess water in the case of, say, in the form of this fountain, and they remove the carbon dioxide. These animals have the ability to stay underwater for a long time, right? And this is the speciality of both of these organisms. And there are different kinds of organisms which also have this mechanism. Usually they do not have blowholes, but they have different ways. Like if we talk about the sea snake, sea snake also comes up to the surface to breathe, right? So these organisms have lungs, right, and they have blowhole to take in the air that is present in the atmosphere, right? So in this way we see that how the organisms, that is the fishes and your whales and dolphins, breathe inside the water. In this session we are going to talk about respiration in plants. The question is, do plants also respire? Now, as we know that plants also are living organisms, and hence they also need the energy to perform different life processes. Definitely, the energy that is needed by the plant is much less than the energy that is needed by animals, because plants are stationary. They are, they are fixed at one point, but they also need energy, and to produce that energy, they need oxygen. So the plants also respire. Now, the plants have, or rather I should say the plants do not have any kind of special organs that are present for the exchange of gases or respiration, as we saw the case in animals. So, the important thing to understand is that the plants have the ability, rather the plant parts have the ability to breathe independently. That means each part of the plant can exchange, in each part of the plant, exchange of gases can take place independently. That means that suppose we know that there are three important vegetative parts of the plant, that is your leaves, stems and root, right? And all of these three parts are able to respire or or perform exchange of gases independent of each other. That means the respiration occurs or exchange of gases occurs in leaf separately, stem separately and root separately. So first of all, let's understand how do exchange of gases takes place in the case of leaves, right? So leaves we know are important part of the plant which carry out photosynthesis. And in photosynthesis, we saw that this was a process which occurred during the day, and in this process CO2 was taken in and oxygen was removed, right? Now, when we talk about respiration, right, this process occurs all the time, right? So it occurs both in the day as well as in the night, right? And the difference is in this process oxygen is taken in, and the process is that the oxygen is taken into the leaves and CO2 is removed out of the leaf. Now we already know, and you must have recognized this particular structure, and this structure is the stomata. This stomata are the small openings at the back of the or at the lower portion or the lower surface of the leaves. Stomata helps in exchange of gases. That means in photosynthesis, it helps to take in the carbon dioxide and remove oxygen. Whereas in the case of respiration, it allows the movement or inside movement of oxygen and removal of carbon dioxide. This oxygen that is taken in is used to break down glucose that is made by the starch that is made by the leaves and release energy, CO2 and water, right? And the water, that is the water vapor that is made during this process, is again released out through the stomata. Over here you can see that the stomata is in open position right now, and in this diagram it is closed, right? So in this way the leaves perform the process of respiration on its own with the help of the stomatal pores. Also please remember, it's a very very important point. Many times students get confused that photosynthesis occurs only during the day, that is in the presence of sunlight, whereas respiration happens both in day and night. Also remember students that the oxygen that is utilized by the plant is far less than the oxygen it releases. That's why again the plants form a very important and crucial part of our environment, right? Now, Paheli has a very important question, and you must also be wondering that whether roots which are underground also take in oxygen. If so, why? Because I already told you in the beginning of the session that each part of the plant is able to respire on its own. That means the exchange of gases occurs on its own. In leaves we saw, because the leaf is present above the ground and it has stomatal pores which allow the exchange of gases. but the roots that are present underground, how do they respire? So now let's answer this question. So as you can see, this is a diagram depicting the root and soil particles. First of all, let's understand that root that we are talking about has a very microscopic part that is called as the root hair. These are very small and very thin parts. What happens in the case of roots is that the soil particles that are there have air spaces in between them, right? So these are the air spaces that are present between the soil particles, right? These air spaces, like the name suggests, is air or the spaces that are rich in air. Now, the root hair, what happens in this case is able to take up oxygen by the help of diffusion and remove carbon dioxide, right? So because it's a very thin or a very small layer, so the root hair is, you can understand that the boundary of the root hair is just one cell thick. So these are really, you can say these are really thin, and diffusion of gases takes place easily. So the air spaces that are there help in taking in of the oxygen and removal of the carbon dioxide. Right? So in this way we see how the root hair or root respire inside the ground. Right? Now, there is another question that might occur, and over here I would like to remind you that it is always, if you remember, we always said that the earthworm is the friend of the farmer. The reason is that because during its movement it eats through the soil, and what happens because of that is aeration of the soil occurs. That means it creates air spaces. Right? So air spaces are very, very important for the growth of the plant because it allows the growth of the root. Right?